maybe studying the history of our own culture. I'm talking about people from the Azania school itself. I'm talking about somebody who was careful about it. Talking about those schools. Because you can imagine what it means. These are black people who stand up and say, well, we want to do this. So I'm saying to you, let's make peace with the fact that we're likely to lose this battle if we take the position of Achimau. But we must be prepared for this. I think that we have today is a good example also of the possibility to win from the position of no compromise. I think Brother Malcolm X was very clear about talking about how Negro can feel this by these two. These for me are the two lines. And I mean, let's see what happens with these two lines. My theory is that no longer asking the big question. How do we explain, now without, the age is so that I mean, there's no question about that. But how do we explain the fact that 20 years later they're continuing this project? I think that we must go back to understanding the creation of the modern production state. Not only the state, but the creation of us as black people in South Africa. You see, and I'm going to say some things that I'm sure we're going to fight about. Those are things that we fight about. In the creation of the black, the big question for me is what have we lost? We didn't just lose the land. We lost a bit more than the land, and I'm going to talk about it. In my contract to get here, I go through black country. I go through some sort of discussion of some of the things that we lost and how we lost it. Quickly, and then I can move on. Just let's accept it. We lost land, we lost labor, we lost our African sense of peace. We lost land, we lost labor, we lost this thing called Africa, and I know that's the big problem. I argue that it's very strange that our consciousness is 1652, but by slavery already, when they went to West Africa and places like that, before we were colonized and they settled, in a sense, the African sense of being was being destroyed at that point. And I think we must bring back that relationship between us and slavery. Our people went taken to the new world. What have we lost? I argue, just like Cameroon, we have lost the African metaphysics. We've lost our culture. We've lost our ability, capacity to speak back. Huh? We lost African agents. We became black. We became black. This is my argument. What I've seen and how I've responded to this speech, the two responses, and I'll come back to this point. The first response of us when we were black, and please, this is a big definitional problem with African and black. This is my proposition, and I'll tell you why I say this. If it's an African, it's fine. I mean, I know what's an African and who's black, and the world knows that. I mean, I'm not going to have too many battles with you. Although I would say, we insist I'm an African, yes, you are an African. The world knows you are black. That's no problem. These two responses. The first response, and it's a response of an oppressed people. We insist we want to speak back, right? And we see it today again. A lot of it is happening. We insist that the African culture is great. Africa was great. We were kings. We go to Egypt, Timbuktu. We show the great Zimbabwe. We have civilization. They arrive here, naked and so on. We show it. And part of it is this. That is beautiful. And then some people want to go back to Africa. Okay. For me, it is a totally inadequate response. Because I don't think it accounts for what it means at the point of enslavement for black people to be reduced to a point of being subhuman. Yeah? So now if I and a cow are put together on an auction block, there's a price for the cow, there's a price for me. I am a subhuman, I am an animal. No one has been captured like that in known history. And not only this, they'll take me and they'll put me to be on the field, to pull things, just like they do with animals. This point, I think, is important because it unifies us even when we're here. It unifies us with those who went through the Atlantic. Those who went in those plantations were slaves and animals. When that happens, it doesn't matter that I insist this is toy. Because of that is the language of the thing. I insist. Because I exist outside of the human which is white at this point. So this will come back. So let's not let it beautiful material in Africa don't know me. Yeah, we must do this, but we must accept it in everything. There's something else we must do. Some other things that we need to do. If this alienation of Mngxitama and social complex and so on cannot be resolved by this preaching to us that we know it was art there. The first university, it is art. And you know how those go, those products and stuff. The pyramid, it is art. No. Some of my brothers, actually, my friends, they started doing Bakunda hieroglyphs, those strange writings, yeah. Because they want the truth. I quickly will ask that there is no going back to any Africa. That Africa was captured, destroyed, distorted. Any part to that Africa already is over-determined by the colonial and slave experience. And this is why I think the big differences with some of my brothers and sisters in the school. Because they say, no, we are about things. What we're going to do, my point is that we have to recreate ourselves. And some of the points about the recreation, I'll make them here. So what's the compromise? I think to go back to that initial point I made about the compromise that those who compromise. The compromise that will exist in the contemporary was to assume Western constitutionalism. Western constitution, rule of law, including politics. It is a bit a paradox. In South Africa, I think, a great example. This paradox is this. We have a constitution that gives us rights. The more rights they give us, the worse our actual circumstances become. You see here, this constitutionalism, I said as the rule of Mngxitama. Every country now, this year, enters again, right, has been in relation to land, but land is not going to come there. Our language for liberation has been compromised because we made it demands within agreement. We want to justify why what we do. And I'll tell you. Let's take this example. I know people, there's a big film out now called Django Unchained. Please, it's a big film out. Our brother in America, it's about slavery. It's about like a right law. If you can, please go check it. But Spike Lee, our brother, the film is made by white men currently. Our brother Spike Lee, who's a filmmaker, when he did that amazing film called Malcolm X. He responded and said, I will not watch the film. It's an insult to black people and to my ancestors. Right? I watch the film and I like a lot of things about it. But let me take this. Look at Spike Lee and Tarantino. I don't agree with Spike Lee really. But in this fight between Tarantino and Spike Lee, I am with Spike Lee. You know the point I'm trying to make is this. We, because of our history, we want to justify ourselves all the time. If there's a war between the white and the black in the street, your job is to immediately join the fight on the side of the black person. Your job is not to ask the question, that's how I'm known. This is a very important question. And I think we must go on like this. To liberate this language. If there's two getting better going on between the white and the black, you immediately join the black comrade, you see the guy, and then after you say, you know, I know it. This is important because after you don't do this, I don't think we understand what has happened in the past 700 years. Any war between us and them is a just war. Any war, doesn't matter what. Then let me just make few other examples. This separation of our compromised language makes this very unfortunate situation where, for instance, our workers, these are the brave contemporary struggles. About they don't want them or the minds, they want it. I don't know where we realize what that means. Our people are prepared to for a wage. So that's why us and Marxists part ways. We argue that in black consciousness, you do not want a wage, you want everything. Every donors, our people are fighting and prepared to be shot, to be arrested for 250 rand a day. They are not saying we're taking the land now and changing this around right now. I argue that this compromise language for liberation is part of what has happened since the time of the negotiation. We accepted the terms of the white men and their language. I was going to tell you about land as well. You're going to get land, yes.